The Galien Foundation fosters, recognizes, and rewards excellence in scientific innovation to improve the human condition.
André Malraux said once in one of his novels, "Une vie humaine ne vaut rien, mais rien ne vaut une vie humaine." Human life is worth nothing, but nothing is worth a human life. All these men and women are trying to save human lives. Is there anything more noble than that?
The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year Best Pharmaceutical Product, Best Biotechnology Product, Best Product for Orphan Rare Diseases, Best Medical Technology, Best Digital Health Solution, Best Incubator Accelerator Equity, Best Startup. Around the globe, the Prix Galien is considered as the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for the industry, mobilizing an unrivaled network of Nobel laureates and top biomedical scientists. The Galien Foundation manages an independent, cross-functional, and geographically diverse program of events and sponsorship to brand the best of the best in new medicines and diagnostics. The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Roy Vagelos Pro Bono Humanum Award for Global Health Equity is bestowed to an individual, a company, an academic institution, or a non-governmental agency that has helped to improve the human condition through the application of biopharmaceutical science to problems of developing or underserved populations worldwide.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
Staging this event in Africa is a significant statement that science and innovation are needed as much here in Africa as anywhere else.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Galien Foundation Week of Biomedical Innovation webinars here in New York City. My name is Nafiz Awahir. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Razorfish Health, which is part of the Publicis Group. And I'm delighted to be here to be a host on one of these webinars. The objective of this week's series of interviews and panel discussions is to provide additional content and background for our largest annual event, the Prix Galien USA Awards, to be held this Thursday in conjunction with our annual Galien Forum of speakers who represent the top scientific experts and leaders in global health. Because the mission of the Galien is innovation to improve the human condition, we have developed this webinar series to give our nominees for Best Pharmaceutical Product, Best Biotech, Best MedTech, Best Rare or Orphan Disease Product, Best Digital Solution, and Best Startup or Accelerator/Incubator categories greater visibility in describing their journey of medical discovery. This year's Galien USA Awards has a record 178 nominees in 7 categories from nearly 150 companies, covering 15 diverse therapeutic areas, ranging from cancer, cardiology, and neuroscience to infectious disease and very rare genetic diseases, as well as vaccines, which are what we're here to discuss today. We will be looking closely at all of these products and all of these critical areas throughout the week. So for today's webinar, in the Best Biotechnology category, which is our focus today, we'll be holding 3 separate webinars. The members of the awards committee decided to arrange each of the 3 webinars to center on specific biotech therapeutic segments, cancer, vaccines, and then genetic, autoimmune, and chronic disorders. This, however, is going to be a fireside chat and is devoted to one nominee in the vaccine space. It is my great pleasure, my wonderful honor to be joined today by Dr. Alejandra Gutman, who's the Senior Vice President of Vaccine Research and Development for Pfizer Incorporated, who are nominated for Best Vaccine for Prevnar 20. Welcome, Dr. Gutman.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Wonderful. Before we begin, I've been asked to remind anybody attending we're right now attending the webinar that there's an accessible link to a 100-word statement submitted by each of the companies on each of the nominated products in the category. And the link is available for viewing throughout the during the webcast. Just simply click on it. Dr. Gutman, it's been a great year for vaccine science in general, and between the updated COVID vaccine, the launch of Abrysvo, and of course Prevnar 20, a banner year for Pfizer vaccines. Congratulations on your nomination today.
Thank you very much. It has been actually quite a year, right? As you said, we just have our 5th approval actually of vaccines in 2023. So I couldn't be more proud to be here today actually representing Pfizer vaccines to talk about whatever you want to ask me.
Well, today our focus is going to, Dr. Gutman, our focus is going to be on the nominated product, which is Prevnar 20, which is a super exciting updated version of the Prevnar 13 vaccine. Can you tell me a little bit about the unmet need that drove Pfizer's development of Prevnar 20?
Yeah. So, we obviously it's a huge medical need, and this actually goes to the very beginning, right? It's the 20 years, more than 20 years that Pfizer has in this technology, and the fact that we were able to first develop the 7-valent vaccine, followed by 13. And as we have been able to really see the impact of these vaccines around the world, in both, the infant pediatric population as well as older adults, we continue to see, as you are able to, suppress or completely almost eliminate some of the serotypes that used to cause most of the disease, you see the emergence of other serotypes. So Prevnar 20 actually covers, an additional 7 serotypes that we have seen, very slowly kind of going up as we were able to really have the impact that we have with Prevnar 13.
Right. So the 7 serotypes that you mentioned that have been included, 8, 10A, 11A, et cetera, those 7 serotypes, why those? Why choose those specific ones out of the 90 serotypes that are associated with Streptococcus pneumoniae?
That is a great question. And, we know that there are many, many serotypes, and not all of them cause actually disease in humans. And the work that led to the selection of those 7 additional serotypes was the work of looking at the epidemiology of the disease, right? And as I mentioned, as you see, the great results and the impact that Prevnar 13 had, we were able to, look at what was happening at the population level to see what were the next serotypes that continued to emerge. And so that was the result of, extensive work to identify which will be the next ones that will be causing disease. And so those are the ones included in the current vaccine, which is actually, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the complexity of creating almost what would be the equivalent to have almost 20 different vaccines in one, right? And that's really a part of the great technology that was developed in the mid-90s and early 2000 years.
So you started to mention the challenges of developing a vaccine. So I'm gonna enumerate a couple of them. Right. The first is that you're trying to put a 20-valent vaccine together, which is essentially, as you pointed out, 20 separate vaccines. The second challenge you mentioned earlier was how do you predict the 7 serotypes that will be emerging resistance? What are the other challenges that you faced while developing this vaccine? The biggest challenges, do you think?
Well, the challenges are to, is obviously we have a great technology, right? But this is the technology of the conjugation of 20 different serotypes where you want to have the consistency that they are manufactured on in a very consistent manner. That comes with the chemistry of that, and then all the different analytical assays that need to be done to characterize each release of the vaccine, the different components that we need to get, that are many, right? The amount of raw materials, there are hundreds of raw materials that go into this, the different manufacturing steps that you need to do, the quality test, So it takes a lot of effort, work, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in colleagues in our manufacturing plants, from the time that you start to the time that you can release a lot. So that is by itself. I don't know if at this point we'll say that it's a challenge, but we obviously need to have all these steps really very well characterized, right, to ensure that we can produce and continue to support the release of different lots to vaccinate.
So you mentioned just now conjugation as a challenge, and one of the questions I had around the vaccine technology itself was the choice of conjugate versus polysaccharide. Can you tell me a little bit about why you made that decision, or why choose to do a conjugate vaccine?
Yeah, so that goes back to the very early work, as I mentioned, in the 90s, and probably much earlier than that, where we know that the polysaccharide itself actually is not immunogenic. And so you need to conjugate that. In our case, we do that with with a protein which is CRAM, and that's really what allows the immune system to really be able to develop the antibodies, right? So it's just the polysaccharide by itself actually does not kick the immune system in the way that you want to be able to induce the immune responses to eventually be protective.
So the polysaccharide alone will have a decline in immune response over time, and the conjugate allows for a longer time for immune protection. Okay, got it. So speaking of that, here's another thought I had. Children and adults experience pneumococcal disease so very differently. Was addressing that issue a challenge in developing a vaccine that has to work effectively to prevent everything from otitis media in children, in babies, to meningitis, to invasive pneumococcal disease in older adults?
Yeah. So, it's a good question. I think it's a little bit of evolution of what we saw initially when, this initial Prevnar vaccine, the 7 serotype was developed, was initially developed for a huge unmet medical need, right? Which was invasive pneumococcal disease in infants, actually, manifested by sepsis and meningitis, and as we saw, and the impact that vaccine had, were basically initially wiped out almost. You can talk to people in training now, and they will, pediatricians don't get to see what people saw 25 years ago, and we have seen that, luckily for other pathogens. So I think that part of the evolution was to, number one, see the impact that had, and then develop the vaccine, which was the 13-valent vaccine, which we developed for both indications, right? To continue to have the impact in invasive pneumococcal disease in infants, but also realize that this is pneumococcal disease actually is a bad disease in adults as well, especially those who have chronic medical conditions. So just age alone is a big risk factor. So it is part of, it's one of the great things to work on vaccine development. So I cannot say that initially when we did the initial 7-valent vaccine, that was in maybe the plans, but obviously as we moved to Prevnar 13, we understood how critical it was to have that for the older adults as well. And obviously now with PCV20, we are building on the success that we had and the impact that PCV13 had in the older adult population as well.
So you mentioned just now that since the advent of the 7-valent vaccine, many of your trainees today, 25 years after 24 years, I guess, after we introduced Prevnar 7, have not really ever seen invasive pneumococcal disease in a baby. Do you think, though, that there is still an awareness challenge around awareness when it comes to invasive pneumococcal disease, particularly in adults?
That is a great question. I would say that it's not that they've never seen it, but something that used to be probably one of the most common reasons for admission to the hospital. Now they may see one case here and there. So we clearly had a huge impact on the infants and invasive disease. With respect to your question about awareness, I will hope. I have now practiced medicine for many years since I came to work on vaccine development from my days in the hospital. I think that is a good understanding about practitioners that we have now a tool, right? That is, where you have a disease that is vaccine preventable. And so we can always do better with vaccination uptake, but I think that in the older adult population, pneumococcal pneumonia and invasive disease actually something that practitioners are continuing to see. And so we probably have more room to continue to educate and, increase awareness of how important it is to vaccinate those who are 65 and older, as much as, those who have conditions that may put them at risk for invasive disease and pneumonia.
We were talking about some of the wonderful benefits that we've seen over time with Prevnar 7. With Prevnar 13, one of the long-term benefits that we saw over time was that the introduction of PCV 13 led to a reduction in racial disparities in invasive pneumococcal disease in both children and adults. While there's no way for you to predict the future, what would your greatest hopes be for Prevnar 20 in the future?
Well, I will hope that we continue to see that, right? So we know that pneumococcal disease, and now talking about adults, the health disparities that you are referring are those that often come attached with, being a minority and, higher incidence of disease and maybe sometimes lower access to medical care. And we have seen, as you said, very nicely that Prevnar 13 has, broken a little bit that gap or brought that gap a little bit together. And I will hope that we continue to see that with Prevnar 20 in the adult population. And actually, when you talk about, global population and infants, obviously, Prevnar 13 has had a huge impact in, around mortality actually in infants around the world. And I will hope that we'll continue to see that with PCV 20.
Wonderful. I'm just going to change the conversation a little bit away from Prevnar 20, being somebody who's worked on so many vaccines, groundbreaking vaccines over the years. Have you seen a change in societal attitudes towards vaccination over time? And that's a very loaded question, but
it is a very loaded question because, it's a complex question, right? It is so yes, the answer is yes, and I think that we can do, from a society perspective, we can probably do better. Unfortunately, the COVID vaccine, created such an opinion in the population about, who, the good that the vaccine did versus those who don't believe in the vaccine, and that has, in a way, transpired into other vaccines. So I am sure that you are aware that during the COVID pandemic, uptakes of vaccines in general, right, in the pediatric population and the older adults went down, and I know that now it's going up again. But there is a lot of education that needs to be done at the, I think in the healthcare sector, but also with the public. And we probably should be thinking together as a society how to continue to, be able to vaccinate, because the difference that vaccines, are making and have made in the last century, right, at population base, and the fact that we have been able to be so, to reduce and eliminate disease is such a powerful thing. And, one of the reasons why I love what I do. But vaccines that, are manufactured or make that are not being given to people are not good. So we do need to probably do better. I'm not sure if I answered the question. It's a very complicated question.
It is complicated. Yep. Absolutely. No, I think it's a beautiful answer. And I guess it leads me to my next question. Much of what we do at Galien is celebrate what we do as an industry and, can sort of shine a light on, I can think of almost no industry so committed to the betterment of the human condition. Yet there are challenges with our perception, in the public. What can we as an industry do to help sort of mitigate some of these challenges around vaccine hesitancy? What do you think? What do you think we could be doing better?
Yeah. So, I don't know if it's what we can do better, but we can, one of the main messages I always try to have is that, whether we take 10 years to bring a vaccine to market or where we take 8 months, as we did with the COVID vaccine, we stand by very, rigorous research and by steps that need to be followed to ensure that the safety of the people, right? So vaccines have the beauty that they're given to healthy people, which is, so the risk benefit is different than when you are working about, for example, a cancer drug. So I think that part of the message, which I hope we do well, but maybe it's always room to do better, is to continue to educate and explain as many times as we can that our most, important, thing when we develop a vaccine is about the safety. And we don't, ever cut corners. We don't move fast because we need to bring a vaccine. We do things, as I said, in a very rigorous way. We follow, the steps that we need to follow. We go from phase 1 to all the way to phase 4. And, luckily now, a little bit accelerated by the COVID vaccine, we can shorten some of those times. But we don't shorten them because we're compromising the way that we do it. We just work in a different way. So, what can we do better? I think it's just to continue to educate and be clear about the message of how we do things with the highest standards to ensure that what we eventually will put in babies or in older adults are, vaccines that are safe.
I think it's a wonderful place for us to sort of pause our conversation and see if we have any questions from the audience for Dr. Gertman. Well, if we don't have any questions, then I'm going to first thank Dr. Gertman for taking some time out of her day to talk to us. It's been a wonderful conversation. Again, cannot congratulate you enough on the achievement that that you have with Prevnar 20. It's a wonderful achievement, and I wish you the best of luck in winning the award itself. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just for anybody out there who's listening, the webcast will be viewable on the Galien Foundation's homepage at www.galienfoundation.org. And for anyone who would like to attend, the Thursday's forum begins at the Alexandria Center for Life Sciences on the east side of Manhattan at 7:30 a.m. and includes a group of keynote leaders in industry, CEOs from across the U.S. and Europe, and will conclude with a presentation of the 2023 Roy Vongelos Pro Bono Humanum Award and the Pre-Galien Award Center at the American Museum of Natural History. Again, on the west side of New York. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Gertman. Thank you for all our attendees. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.